Good morning, everybody. I have Ryan with me today for our first live event focused on digital transformation talks. And today, Ryan and I are going to be taking the generational viewpoint of tips for a successful transformation. Ryan, can you give everybody a quick introduction before we dive into those 5 tips that we have outlined for the group today?
Sure, Emma. Thanks for having me. I'm Ryan Raker. I'm from Abby. Today I'm coming at you from, the home office because that's one of probably the biggest transitions or the transformations that we've all experienced this year. So all things now are really being communicated through these devices. So we get to come at you live today to talk about some of the transformation tips that we've experienced. So some of the things that we're seeing this year, seeing in our industries, seeing just about maybe where things just don't make sense. So I lead digital marketing for Abby. Abby's a digital intelligence software company. Emma is one of our partners. So we go to market together, selling some of these products, helping some of our customers with their solutions, really learning about things digital, transitioning to transformation or transforming organizations in this new digital age. But we often see these sort of dilemmas that people face. So we've been having a lot of conversations recently and wanted to kind of just throw some things out there and start to have a conversation more about what we thought were low-hanging, sort of easy to consume fruits that not everyone's grasping this year.
Thanks, Ryan. So as he said, my name is Emma and I work with Naviant. And today is actually my 6-year anniversary with the company. So we are going to dive right into our conversation about these tips that we have for you in navigating digital transformation, kind of from the millennial viewpoint. And we wanted to talk about this because I think one thing that Ryan and I were talking about is millennials now are becoming one of the biggest buying powers in the world. I think the statistic I saw was over $3 trillion worth of buying power. So millennials are a major part of your customer base. And we now make up about 75% and growing of the workforce. So when you're looking at implementing digital transformation within your business, the lion's share of the people that are going to be engaging in that transformation are going to fall into this demographic. Now, obviously, not every millennial is exactly the same. And these tips that we're going to be talking about are certainly focused on this viewpoint of transformation, but I think that these tips that we're talking about are kind of universal. And the reason that I say that is, remember, the millennials were raised by someone. So our ideals and our, these things that we're going to talk about are things that were important to our parents and our grandparents, and they instilled those as values to us. So that means that these are things that are universal. We're just a little bit more loud and proud, as is stereotypical for our generation, about what we need. So as we dive into the conversation, I want to starting with why and the importance behind helping people understand why you're moving through your digital transformation. So to get us started with that conversation, I guess, Ryan, one thing that I mentioned, we did a blog post in this topic. One thing I mentioned is that everyone is inherently, as humans, a little selfish. And I think when you can start with why, you help people start to figure out why it's important to them individually, because they start to take that train of what is why is the company moving forward with this initiative and how does it help them? You want to share a little bit on your thoughts on the importance behind the idea of why, Ryan?
So everyone always wants to know, why are we doing something? I mean, it's inherently human. Why am I doing this? Why am I a part of this project? People are often brought into meetings and different discussions when they don't even know what their role is. There's no predefined agenda. Think about your projects. While some high-level CEO or management person is telling you that you need artificial intelligence, but why? What do we need? How do we need it? What's my role in this? So I think when we talk about these projects that we face together, we're thinking about things like being data-driven, utilizing technology and intelligent automation that's going to help identify opportunities. The question often that I think we've been seeing is, okay, we were really, really successful on our first project, but what do I have to do next? what's the next thing? This was okay. I was okay with making the first progress without the why, but what do I go to next, and why am I doing that? There's no really rhyme or reason to why people need to know why. It's really about having, it's really the buy-in, but people deserve that. And it's going to add more value over time, because if people understand their roles in a project or in something that they're doing, it matters. And for whatever reason, the millennials, and we seem to want to have this more. It's not just, this is the way we've always done it. There needs to be some type of explanation. So this is both advice for the customer side of these things, as well as in the internal projects that we're seeing. But I think the why is critical to success of any of these projects.
I think one thing you just mentioned is that idea of millennials wanting to understand the why and maybe being a little bit more aggressive in that need, I think is a fair way to categorize that. And I think when we look at our generation, one of the things that's talked a lot about when you have these generational discussions is that millennials want a greater purpose for what they're doing. They don't want to just go to work to do work. They want to understand what their organization is driving towards and how those things can impact the world around them. So when you take a look at how digital transformation can drive those deeper driving forces behind an organization, that can be a really powerful way of helping shape your initiatives for people. So talking about, if we're able to save money here, this is what that means for the organization. Or if we can add time to your day by taking away these mundane tasks, these are the types of things that we hope you will get in your job. So if we can take away the mundane tasks of entering in information because we used OCR to capture that electronically, then you're going to have X amount of your time back to be able to think and drive creative processes within the organization. Or, maybe the organization is going to have time to give you the ability to go volunteer. And doing those types of things to add into the culture of the organization, I think can be a really powerful way that you can take that why and turn it into something that is a motivating factor for people behind the scenes. One other thing that you mentioned was the idea of data and information driving it. And I think we would be remiss to start having this conversation specifically about our generation and not bring up the fact that we are driven by data and likes and views. And when I post this video later, I'm going to look back to see how many people have looked at it and how many people commented on it. And while there might be some inherently vain avenue of like the social media side of things, I think ultimately it comes down to, we want to know that we're providing value to the world and that what we're doing matters and there's a reason behind it. Can you talk a little bit about ways that organizations can use data to drive their transformation?
So absolutely. You can think about the old types of things like business intelligence solutions. Everyone knows that they've looked at a dashboard, but there's still that inherent, well, this is what so-and-so thinks. And I know this is actually where this conversation stemmed from for us, because I won't mention any client names, but our client was really just, and I don't think her name was actually Susan, but Susan in accounting felt that this was the next thing because, well, she saw a metric in time from a dashboard. But there was no real true understanding of what drove that dashboard item, what set that KPI. So historically, BI type of tools are looking at some metric as a historical figure of things that occurred in the past, but without anything that's real time or really suggesting taking action. These are things like process mining solutions. Now, obviously, I'm throwing that in there because it's one of Abby's staple products, but the process mining type of solutions that can identify why things are happening, what's driving specific tasks. And then that means that analysts can go in and start actually talking to Susan in accounting and say, well, Susan, it's nice that the BI dashboard says that this number is what it is, but actually here's what caused it. It's not about what you thought caused it, what you felt that caused it. And that's really how you're showing this transformation or how things are going towards digital. Another part of this conversation started to stem around, well, it was a contract, right? So culturally, things evolved into, how are we touching paper documents? You have something that needs to be written on ink. Is that really something that we want to touch and talk about and really do in COVID era? Probably not. So I think there's a lot that can help these things, but it's really about recognizing not only the customer need, but the employee need as well. Because if you have happy employees, you're going to have happy customers. So ultimately, the data is going to drive decision making. You're going to be able to explain to people why they're a part of the process and how they can improve things. And again, everybody wants to know, what's my role in this? Yeah, it's going to come down to this video with likes and all those things, but the same thing happens in the workplace, let's be honest.
I think you mentioned another thing that kind of is a nice bridge for us to go into our next tip. So that first one is start your transformation journey with why and getting everybody united around that reason of why. But you mentioned this idea of Susan in accounting, or maybe it's, I'm going to pick on one of my coworkers, Kevin, because it's another solid name I've used for these, but like saying, Kevin thought that this is where we should start. That some of that can also play into culture. We were talking about somebody from the top saying, this is what we're going to do and this is why we're going to do it, versus having a culture that really fosters collaboration and innovative thought from that perspective. And I know that there's a lot of talk about culture and what millennials are looking for, and I'm going to just come right out and say it. Culture is a hell of a lot more than ping pong tables and snacks. And I say that with a little bit of jest because Naviant does have a ping pong table and snacks, but that's not why I chose to work for them. And it's not why I'm, been here for 6 years now. It comes down to the other parts of the culture that are innate to an organization that really give you the opportunity to think about things differently and try new things. And I talk about this because in the past I've had great companies that have great cultures that just aren't the quite right fit for me. Not that anybody there was bad, it just wasn't the type of innovative, exciting culture that I wanted to be a part of. And I think there's something really powerful about having a culture that encourages you to have choice and also has your back if things don't go perfectly. So can you talk a little bit, Ryan, about like what you feel is critical for a company setting up culture that's going to inspire innovation?
So I wish we could have had everyone who's attending today and maybe watching on demand be a part of all the conversations that we've had in the past, because this isn't the first one. We've had significant, inspiration that has driven these conversations. I'm seeing, you're saying some of these things about your experiences and those that I've probably heard in depth, and some of those things that many would recognize because they've either interviewed there, they've worked with this partner, they've worked with this customer, but they're inherently novel in the sense, but also ones that leave a lasting impression. So you make a good point about options, but it's really about making choices. Now, maybe this is where millennials are inherently biased because we've been extremely privileged in the ability to have many options, whether it's shopping online or if it's how we get around. We have more than just a taxi cab these days. So I remember going to college and we didn't have Uber, but now you wouldn't think about going out without calling an Uber. So while that's a small example, the next is really talking about what is the boundaries that we have to follow. And you're talking about cultural fit. And for any millennial, staying somewhere for 6 years is actually, by statistics, would be unheard of. And in my response to that is, well, if it's a good company, why would you leave? But are there inbounds when you talk about work? Are there things that inherently need to be bounded by the work that we do? Now, when you talk about what our technologies and what our companies as partners provide for the market, we often think that we change the rules of the game. We often think that we're changing the way the office works. By the way, is the office still down on Main Street in Center City on the 33rd floor? Many of those answers are that they're not. And I think as we approach this from a millennial perspective, it's not unheard of to work from home today. But prior to COVID taking over the world, could you go to your boss and say, hey, I'm working from home today? Is that okay? Or is your boss going to say, no, I need you in the office because I need you from 9 to 10 a.m. to sit at your cubicle, answer these emails. And then at 11, we have a 15-minute set up for the week or set up for the day, and then we're going to do this. And it's so structured. It's so structured like a football game. And I know that we've talked about this because we have an affinity for football, Emma and I. But is this the type of thing that you can make decisions as a quarterback and start to play the game of football or be the quarterback for the office? Is it beyond fun and games, and is work something that you enjoy to do? Can you make decisions? From a cultural perspective, I think millennials so desire to be decision makers, and not just decision makers at the high level that they want to make the strategy for the company, but they want to be able to make decisions on their own, a part of their project. And I think we have some fun stories to tell about that.
I think it's interesting too. I'm going to pull the mom card here for a second. And I think it's important to think about the types of decisions that you're letting your employees make as well. And are you only giving two options to still kind of control the decision that's being made? So when my almost 2-year-old is choosing socks in the morning, I don't let her choose from all the available socks that are available. She gets to pick from 2. So when you take a look at how you're positioning decision making and choices, are you actually giving people freedom, like you were talking about, of, you know, here's the end zone and you have to be perfectly within the end zone, or here are your 2 choices that you need to choose from? Or are you truly saying, here's my problem, can you help me come up with a solution? And I think that when you talk about millennials wanting to be decision makers, or really anyone wanting to be decision makers, we don't want to be told how we have to make that decision. And I think it's a very, very limiting thought process to limit people on how they go about solving a problem. Because I know from experience with some of my coworkers that think very differently than I do, I will go to them to talk to them about my idea of how to solve a problem, and they can help me poke holes in it because they have a different thought process than I do, and they think about things differently. I don't always have the most linear thought process, and in certain scenarios, that's wonderful. In other scenarios, I'm going to end up forgetting about something that's ultimately critical to that process. And so if you try to box people in to how they solve a problem, you're not going to get the same type of ingenuity or innovation that you would if you truly let people take the opportunity to make decisions. And sometimes they're going to fail. We talked about this idea of culture, and part of why I enjoy being a part of the culture at Naviant, I'm allowed to do things and try stuff as long as I'm being thoughtful about the success and thinking about how I'm measuring that and adjusting or pivoting my path if I'm not finding success with the activities that I'm taking. And I think that that is a massively critical thing to allow people to do, because you don't learn unless you've failed sometimes, and you learn a lot more when you have to readjust or change the way that you're thinking about something than you do if everything goes perfectly all the time.
So my phone is over here dinging because we mentioned football, and some of our visitors today are, I think, from the UK, because they're so adamant to tell me that the United States football is not the real football. But this lends itself to such a good concept, is that we no longer are confined by our local offices, our local regions, what we know at our local high school football night. We are global companies. We are interacting globally. While we may think locally, these are global actions that many of our business partners and customers face. So yes, of course, perspective matters. Is it a soccer field or is it a United States football field? Does that mean that there's a field goal post at the end? If your boss doesn't tell you which field we're working with, or if your customer doesn't tell you the rules of the game, how are we supposed to know? And it matters. It matters more than just culture, because while you said it's more than ping pong tables and snacks, it also revolves around any of the transformation projects that we're doing, or any of the projects in the office, because we need to set the boundaries, but can the boundaries be expanded on? You look at arena football and you look at the large-scale football outdoors, the rules are mostly the same, but the stadium's not the same size. So these things can change. And by the way, does that mean that they can change while we're playing the game? Well, it all depends on who's leading the project. Is it going to be a flexible project? Is it going to be one that is rigid? Are you going to be a manager that sits at the replay booth wondering whether or not the goal went in past the line completely, or if it was the end zone, that football was caught with two hands and it was the 1-2 step right before the line. Now, if I think back to the Tom and Jerry cartoons, we would just move the line over. It's just a shift of the line. It's a perfect touchdown because we're just going to edit that and move the line out a little bit. And, you see, it makes me think about the old Tom and Jerry cartoons where the rule was broken, you just curved it out and it fit. And sometimes RPA projects are just like that. If it doesn't fit the first time, we change the project and we make it fit. But I think that the driving force for all of that is having the acceptance that you can make decisions. Everyone wants to be independent, own their small part of what they do, and be able to decide. And, it could be as simple as I'm working from home today, or maybe it's I'm working from Starbucks this afternoon, or maybe it's as big as changing the rules to a project that's going to affect a client, a customer, or even a bottom line item that is important to some of their managers or some of the larger team.
So I want to switch gears a little bit. These first two tips that we gave, again, looking at starting with why and building a culture that really is focused on inspiring real life decision making. And talk a little bit about, I mentioned at the beginning, the buying power behind the millennials and how, your customer, whether you're a B2B company or a B2C, is likely going to be heavily made up with millennials. And I want to talk about, especially as we look at digital transformation and some of these intelligent automation tools coming into the marketplace, as consumers, we're interacting with them all the time. So I want to offer some tips on how to make your customers happy through your digital transformation. And I want to start with something that is focused on how does your customer service team or your outreach that's directly engaging with your customers manage communication. And I'm going to say right off the bat, sometimes I want to talk to a person, and that's coming from somebody who is a millennial and somebody who is super excited about intelligent automation. But if the chat box or the voiceover AI isn't doing what I want it to do, I need an escape button. And I think that as we start to look at these technologies coming into this space where customers are engaging with, maybe not always 100% human, and there's automation involved in the scenario, what are the tips that we have for people as they're looking at implementing these types of tools? So I know, Ryan, you've heard me and my stories about both my husband and I losing it and yelling at voiceovers when we just want to talk to a person. So before we dive into you giving your thoughts on this, I want to open a poll to the group and see how many people have actually been through this experience the same way that I have. So for anybody that is on, I am launching a poll right now. I want to hear, have you yelled at a chatbot before? Or are you like a very nice, more relaxed soul that has not done this before?
And this is one of those things that so many of our enterprise customers, and even the experiences we have as customers, they're implementing, whether it's a chatbot. I think the voiceover bots have been, in a call center have been a thing for some time. But I just think about the calls that I often have to the large telecom provider, which I won't name, but that you absolutely get stuck in this endless loop of, I need help. This isn't the thing I need help with. Go back to main menu. And there's no way to just yell operator, support, zero, press zero. So many times that this is left out of the development cycle. And I have to imagine, I'm looking forward to this quick poll here, because I have to imagine that just about everyone is going to be screaming yes at one of these chatbots or these voice automated systems, because we get trapped in endless loops. And if you're not thinking about how to come out of that in your intelligent automation journey, there's human workers that are in the loop. There's not just completely robotic work factory office. These things have to change a bit. So are we putting that into our projects? Are we making rules that are rigid and not able to fit what the user expects? So I didn't see the results. Did we get results from
Yes.
that?
So the results are that 93% of us have yelled. It seems like there's a couple out there who are the nice, compassionate souls that are probably the people that still say thank you to Siri and Alexa and Google every time they interact with them. But this is, I think, a pretty universal challenge that people have with kind of the growing pains of this industry, right? Over time, AI is going to get more intelligent, and chatbots and voiceovers are going to be able to accommodate more and more of these exceptions. But I think this overarchingly talks about the idea of making sure that you're not just automating for automation's sake, and that you are truly thinking about all of the people that are at the center of your digital transformation, and really looking at the process and the people, and then bringing in technology to support your automation efforts. Versus, I heard someone talking the other day about blockchain technology, and they were like, well, I want to hesitate. I don't always just want to throw a blockchain at it because we can. I think the same thing is true about, I don't want to just throw a bot at it because we can. Let's be purposeful with how we're managing the transformation, and still thinking about the fact that at the center of all of this, you have your customers and your employees that have to be a part of that process.
It's a big point, because when you talk about digital assistants, a bot, an Alexa, a Siri, of course, we like to yell at these things. Of course, when they don't cooperate, they bother us. Sure, maybe you can whisper sorry to Alexa, but I promise she doesn't have feelings. Just like the bot that's helping you with your email this morning, or helping you plan events in the future, or scanning your invoices. They don't have feelings. If you have a bot who's managing your call center, that, of course, still today does not have feelings. But this is why the people matter. This is why, no matter their age, their background, their demographic, they matter. It's not a catch-all that a call center can face. There's not a if, then, or statement that solves this. Human touch is still relevant, even if we're not allowed to shake hands and we have to bump elbows, or we have to see each other through these devices. But it does matter, and it should continue to matter, and it should matter in the conversations that we're having, because it goes beyond the culture, it goes beyond the experiences that we have. It goes into, this is just the way things are always have been done, this is the way we need to change it, or this is the way that our customer's partner does it, or this is the way our competitor does it. It's time to be better. So I think you have to think about what the actual process will be for your customers, what your employee journey will look like, how are they going to interact, and be a critical thinker to solve these problems. Obviously, it's not simple, but it's just some advice to, yes, deliver your core product as best you can be, but remember that one trip up could leave a lasting impression. And if I know any better, it's probably going to lead to the next topic. But if I know anything about millennials, is that if you mess up, they're not coming back. So I think it is the next topic, but I want to sort of just explain that as it's not convenient. It's not supposed to be. But looking at how things work, yes, sometimes we just want a person, but also think about, as you're going on this journey of transformation, or you're instilling a new project into your department, think about the people. They do matter. So I'll throw it to you, as I think this is the next topic about loyalty.
Yeah. One thought there before we transition is you mentioned that your AI or your chatbot or your RPA doesn't have feelings, but your people do. The other part of that is the bots, your RPA, your AI, they're not buying from you. And they may be your digital workforce, but you have to be acutely aware of your customers, because one, they have feelings and they're people and they're involved in this process, but they're the ones that are keeping you in business. And when you set me up for the transition to this next tip, is looking at how fickle loyalty can be, I think, across the board, whether it's millennials or anyone else. I can be very, very loyal to my favorite brands. And I think everybody has things that they opt to, clothing brands, or, even the roll of toilet paper that you buy. But if you buy a roll of toilet paper and suddenly they implemented intelligent automation, maybe you don't know that that's happened and something went wrong and they didn't catch it because there weren't enough people involved in the process, and you get your toilet paper and it's not doing its job anymore, you're not going to buy that toilet paper again. Or
I'll tell you what, if my postman delivers the envelope next door, I'm okay with it. But if your robot delivers my papers to the guy next door, I'm going to have an issue. By the way, I'm not going to feel bad because they don't have feelings.
Yeah, you're going to be frustrated with the brand. And you mentioned this idea of making sure that your core business is always on point. And that you are constantly delivering the value that you've promised to your customers. And I think that it's really important as companies are going through digital transformation and changing the way that they interact with their customers, that they keep this idea of your core business being like, keep the main thing, because ultimately, if you aren't going to meet my needs, there's 15 other companies that I can find with on the first page of Google when I look for a competitor. And you need to make sure that you're going to continually meet my main need. Now, do I want other great things from a brand like charitable giving or, funny jokes on their social media or all of those other things? Yeah, sure. Those increase your brand awareness. Those make you a company that people enjoy engaging with. But Ryan, I shared a story with you earlier this year at the onset of COVID where my husband bought from a brand that we have everybody in our family. All four of us have multiple things and it's not a cheap brand. And he bought something, tried it on, it didn't fit. He sent it back in. It took less than 2 weeks for everything when he was giving him his money. It took almost 2 months for the return to hit our bank account after we made the purchase. And during that time, they were all over the news for big social media campaigns that they were running and statements that they were making at a political level. They were changing manufacturing to make political statements. And politics aside, I just want you to do what you're supposed to do and help us make the purchase of your clothing or help us manage that return, or at the very least communicate effectively what's going on your end by using your fancy new technology and automation rather than scheduling out all your social media posts. And that one bad experience has been enough for our family for the last 6 months to look at other brands to make our purchasing decisions. And I feel like I'm a decently reasonable person. So if I'm having this experience, I would imagine people with a lot of emotions behind their buying power are making these types of choices all the time. What is important to you in terms of like a company delivering on their kind of core promise, or like what is something that might make you lose your loyalty?
No, and it goes back to your point about you expect them to deliver on their core products. If you're not delivering on your core products, what are you doing well then? Because to your point, whether it's clothing, a piece of furniture, something that there's an issue for you, you sell furniture. Sell me furniture, deliver it to my front door, make sure there's no rips, tears, stains, anything like that. But the rest of the stuff is minute. I think when it comes down to it, we expect customers to be right, but not because they're right, but because the game has been elevated. Contenders like Amazon have done better. They have raised the bar so that all of us have come to expect more. Whether you're a millennial or not, the fact that you can pull up your cell phone today and there's going to be a device or the thing that your package arrives by midnight tonight. If you have a dilemma where you need to return something, you can use OCR technology to scan your product, to scan a barcode, to scan your ID, to verify an envelope, to verify this. If you're a company who's not implementing these technologies so that when your customer goes to return an item, and this is one example, there's so many, it could go through onboarding or something about signing up for a new product or a new release. If I'm on a mobile device and you're still requiring me to fill out all of my name, address, you don't have a means to take my driver's license, take a picture of it and capture all that information, or take an invoice at a loading dock, snap a photo of that and put it into my ERP system and from the employee side of that, that's an issue. I still want to throw this out there because I think it's so valuable. We put it in the blog, but it was about Jimmy Fallon's 2005 comedy series, but it was Fever Pitch. You know, you love the Sox was the quote, but have the Sox ever loved you back? And the fact is that many of these providers, whether they're large brands or small, have we ever felt like they loved us back? And if they haven't, or if they're not continuing to provide that love through exceptional customer service and exceptional delivery of products, well, then there's someone else that's going to go out there and do it. And of course, for my UK friends, go read the article. We do mention Arsenal. It surely is in there. So I'm glad we did that. Thanks for having them. But I think that there is so much to be said is that we lose sight of our purpose as we try to be something for everyone. And we have to go back to our core values. Loyalty is one thing, but if you lost me and I'm not coming back. And I know, Emma, because of your frustrations when we had that conversation about your products, it's an issue. And it's something that doesn't need to be a part of the issue or the problem. Simplicity, delivering me my products on time, how I want them, and just continuing to do that. You don't need to be something for everyone. Focus on what you do really well. Take that and do it 10 times, 100 times, and 1,000,000 times over. It's what makes exceptional brands exceptional. They continue to provide their core value. They do it repeatedly and they scale it. It's not that we demand this because of what we do, but it's the fact that others are raising the bar. And we should all step up to that because rising tides make all boats float. So it's time that we all start floating a little bit better.
So we've got just a couple minutes left together, and the last tip, so I want to review for the group. The first one is start any digital transformation or really change management within your organization by stressing the why. The second one is really looking at how do you build that culture as more than slides from Google. They have the slides and all these fun things within their culture, but they're also giving people time to think, and they have the 20% rule where they encourage creative thought and individual work efforts. We're looking at the human aspect and making sure that any transformation you have comes back to focusing on the people that are in the center of your process. Looking at encouraging that loyalty through keeping the main thing, or focusing on your core business. And our last tip, as we look at rounding out our conversation today, is really to focus on making doing business with you as simple as possible. So Ryan mentioned at the beginning that the whole catalyst for this discussion was he and I were just having some time where we were catching up, talking with one another, and he mentioned that he had just gotten a contract from somebody that required a wet signature. And we started having this conversation of, there wasn't an option for you to electronically sign that, and it was a project you were excited to do. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but it took way longer for you to execute that contract because they didn't make it fall off a log simple for you to do business with them. This is a silly example, but I can put like $200 worth of something into a cart, and if I don't get free shipping because they didn't make it easy for me, I might abandon that entire cart for like the $6 worth of shipping charges that I would get for bringing it to my house, because it's like, oh, well, that's not easy for me to do business with you now. And I think the same can be said when we look at how easy are you making it for your employees to do their job? Are you giving them the tools that they need to be efficient and effective and enjoy their job? Keeping it simple sounds really simple at the top level, but for an organization, it's not necessarily simple to keep it simple, but your goal should always be to keep things streamlined and focused for your customers and your employees. Ryan, before we end our time and look to see if there's any questions here, do you have advice for people on how to keep it simple?
Well, I think you did a really great job of making it simple, keeping it simple, but recognizing the importance, again, going back to people, processes, and technology. You probably already have the people. Your processes, well, they might be broken. If you don't already have the technology, it's out there. You can reach out to Emma and I. We'll be glad to tell you not only about the products that we have and the technologies that we find cool or ones that we work with on the regular, but all of this really comes down to the why, when we started from the beginning, is starting with why. And I think we've really gone full circle into the reason why is to make it all simple. These steps, these tips are really about making all of our organizations better, whether that's happening through our processes, through the technology, or by educating and improving our people. So I think that all of these are some real life experiences. I wish we could give you all the details of these things in 45 minutes. Of course we can't. But I think that the importance that this overarching from cubicle to couch, the workers are now different. The places of work are different. And I think so many of our colleagues, when we talked about this session, was like, whoa, you guys are going to do that. You're going to put your millennial age group out there. It is a big age group, but it has a large buying power. It makes up a large portion of your enterprise workforce. And it's not because we just want to shout at the rooftops and talk about me, or I. It's really about, this is the way the game is changing. The football field isn't the same size anymore. And by the way, it might not even be in person anymore. So I think that's the thing that we have to look back on these 5 tips, is to look at not only from maybe you want to do this with your millennials, but how can you do this with your workforce? Because even the older groups are starting to expect these things. Give your grandpapa a nice iPhone and he's going to think Amazon can deliver on time every day. And if you're the customer or you're the provider that can't, well, grandpa's going to change his ways too. So I think all of these are some fantastic tips. There's some real life experiences in here from customers, from cases that we're seeing where technology is being implemented. But the simple point about signing ink on a piece of paper, I didn't know what to do. You're right. I can sign it, but how am I getting it back to you? Do you expect me to run down to the printer that's on the first floor when I'm on the 3rd floor? Oh boy, I might just let that sit there for 4 days. And if I'm doing it, your customers are doing it, others are doing it, it goes to the junk drawer. We need to change the game and we need to elevate.
Well, thank you so much for spending the time with me, Ryan, and everybody that's joining us on the live broadcast today. We're going to take this and post it like I do weekly with the digital transformation talks. But I encourage anybody, like Ryan said, who's got questions or wants to talk through this, reach out to one of us. We'd be more than happy to have a discussion with you about any of these topics, or specifically on the types of intelligent automation that we help support our customers with. And then I'd also encourage you to take a look weekly at the discussions that I'm having in this series. I think there's a lot of really valuable real-world experience that'll come your way when you engage with those videos. So thank you, everybody, for your time. And Ryan and I will stay on for any questions here for a couple minutes, but otherwise, have a wonderful day.